All right, this is Rich Uzdowski with Ball State Center for Middletown Studies, and today I'm here with Larry Riley as part of a project where we're looking at the transition to one high school in Muncie with recent consolidation. And Larry was kind enough to come in and talk for a little bit with us today. And we're going to start off with Larry saying for us his full name.
Larry Riley.
Okay, and as another basic question, if you wouldn't mind just telling us your age, your occupation, what you do, how you're connected in the community.
Well, I'm 66. I teach at Ball State in the English department, composition. I also write a column for the Star Press newspaper twice a week, and I've done that for going on 20 years. That's probably how I'm more well known in the community versus on campus.
Yeah, and what are your columns like? What are your topics of discussion?
Political, social commentary, cultural commentary, sometimes humor if I can think I'm being funny.
Yeah.
And I certainly cover local politics, partisan politics and nonpartisan politics, meaning schools.
Okay. It's interesting that you say that because there's a question that we've asked other interviewees, and it's dealt with whether or not they think, and we've interviewed some school board members, so we kind of got an inside perspective there, and we asked them if they thought there were any politics that played into the consolidation decision. From your perspective, did you see any politics playing in?
Well, depending on how you want to define politics, certainly if you talk of politics as being diverse vested interest groups wanting to promote a certain agenda and working to do that, then yes, for at least 10 years that's been going on against consolidation.
Huh, okay. And what, I don't know if you could speak to particulars, but when you say diverse vested interest groups, do you mean groups that are primarily located on the south side of town?
Well, they can be located all over the place. As a matter of fact, if we go back a little farther than, say, recent history, when we go back to the building of Northside High School, the vested interest group was all on the north side, and it was a lot of people who wanted a place for the white kids to go to high school. So no, I don't mean it was all on the south side all the time. Certainly when it came time to close Southside High School, lots of Southsiders rallied around and wanted to keep the place open.
Sure. And now for a more general, broad question, and this is kind of getting really to the heart of the matter. What are your thoughts and opinions, your personal thoughts and opinions on the school consolidation?
Rich, the school consolidation is long overdue. We've been in a downward trajectory as far as enrollment goes for 25 years. And you could almost draw a graph. And I wrote, and I looked it up because I was going through my own archive. It was 10 years ago, it's 2004. I wrote, we need to go to one high school, and it has to be central, and convert Southside to a middle school and close Wilson, which was horribly located 20 years ago when it was built, out in the middle of nowhere. And that was exactly 10 years ago. That's what we did.
So you basically saw the writing on the wall.
Who didn't see the writing on the wall?
Well, you put it more bluntly or more realistically than a lot of people have and still do. Well, what makes you able to see it like that?
Well, I guess in part that's my job, to look at public policy issues and try to dissect them and come up with unbiased or at least objective ways to do that dissection. In schools, there's always a vested interest group of parents whose kids are most closely affected.
Sure.
And it's funny, even if you had, let's say, 3 kids, that's maybe the median family size in Muncie, that means you probably just have 3 3-year periods where somebody's in high school, and you want to make sure that everything's optimal for that kid.
Mm-hmm.
And then once they're out of high school, you're a lot more objective about everything, and you're not as affected necessarily, and you become a little bit less interested, perhaps. And Rich, I can't remember the question you were asking me. What was it again?
No, you were getting to it there. I was going to. Well, you know what? Now I'm forgetting the question too.
Okay, well then I guess we can go to the
Because
next
that wasn't one of the prepared questions. You said something interesting, so I went off of it. No, it was okay. I do remember. It was how you seem to have an objective perspective, and I was just wondering where that would, how you think you're able to be so objective.
Okay. Well, maybe this is part of it, maybe not. When I moved to Muncie the second time, I lived in Muncie in the mid-'80s for a couple of years, moved up to South Bend, came back to Muncie mid to early 90s. And my kids were they were pre-kindergarten, first and third grade coming to Muncie. So I wasn't a big fan of the school that they would be going to, so I asked for a transfer to Washington Carver, which a lot of people's jaws dropped when I told them that, because that wasn't a place where most parents wanted their kids to transfer in.
Mm-hmm.
But it had an open classroom, and my kids were all Montessori in preschool, and I liked that approach. So I asked for the transfer there and got it approved. But the day school began, I had also put in applications for the kids at Burris Laboratory School. And there were openings in first and third grade. And Burris called me, still up in South Bend. They said, we have openings and we're willing to accept your kids.
Mm-hmm.
So then I said, well, I think that's an even better option. Although Burris was always, its reputation was always better than, not always, but for probably the last 20 years, its reputation was better than the reality.
Yeah.
Same way Muncie Central reputation is worse than the reality.
Oh,
But I still opted to take the kids to Burris. I wound up teaching at Ball State, and Burris doesn't provide transportation, so
mm-hmm.
they came in with me to work every morning and went to school and came home with me after school was over. So I didn't have somebody in Muncie Community Schools that I was trying to make sure something did or didn't happen for. And maybe
Sure.
that was a factor, maybe not. I was very participative at Burris, involved. But Burris is a real special school in that there's no school board to interfere with the operation. The school board is the board of trustees at Ball State, and they don't dip down and micromanage the way typical school boards do. So there wasn't a whole lot I felt I had to do at Burris. As it turned out, we went through at Burris something like 4 principals in 8 years, which is, sorry about that,
No, you're fine.
not good to be churning through leadership like that. And Burris was undergoing a real transitional period, including downsizing dramatically because of the Indiana Academy.
Mm-hmm.
So that might have been a factor. I won't try to say it wasn't, but I would have been the same level of objectivity that I think I was.
Yeah. Well, where do you think, I don't know, did you watch the town hall meetings, or were you present at the town hall meetings leading
I
up?
watched them
Okay.
all on the Star Press as they were broadcast.
And I'm going to just assume that you noticed, like I did, that the Southsiders who spoke, there was a lot more emotion coming out of them in their words and their actions when they spoke compared to people who didn't say they were Forest Side or North Siders. Where do you think that emotion stemmed from?
Well, they all had a lot of investment in Southside. Many of them went to Southside.
Mm-hmm.
Many of them well, not many, but a number of them would have been there when it opened. And Southside, have you ever seen the Southside Homecoming Parade?
No, but I've heard many people talk about it.
It's the biggest parade in Muncie. It's incredible. There's a lot of school spirit out there. And there were a lot of good people. So for a town like Muncie, the mythical Middletown, which was for 8 decades an industrial stronghold where kids could, mainly males, could graduate from high school and have no more than a high school education and directly hire on at the factory and work their entire working lives. And with overtime, they would be making the equivalent today of maybe $60,000 a year. Solid salary, and that was a great life. And it was a way of life on the South Side. Most of the factories were on the South Side.
True, yeah.
And up until the 80s, it started toning down, and then it just collapsed. But up until then, which would have been, I guess, 25 years of South Side's existence. Did it open in 62?
I think it might have been a little later.
63?
I think it was the mid-60s. But
Okay. Well, let's say for at least 20 to 25 years, Southsiders had that. And they would, I am going to guess, they would buy a home on the South Side. They would work at the factory on the South Side. They'd send their kids to South Side school after elementary and middle school. And so, of course, there'd be a lot of emotion with that.
So it's almost like, and this is a thesis we've kind of tossed around, like the people who work at the center, it's that was the last bit of their way of life on the south side of town that was taken away. The factories are gone, the good jobs, and then you take away South Side, and you're taking away like the last thing they really had.
And a lot of the consumer sales locales were gone. Kmart closed up and restaurants closed up on the south side. Some new ones opened, but they weren't like restaurants of the old days. Not until about 2004 did Walmart come, 2006, to the south side, which rejuvenated that area a little bit. But yeah, everything was slowly going away. And homes were running down, and the factory buildings that weren't being physically removed were just falling apart, looked like hell.
True, yeah.
I teach English 103 composition, and I require students to get on a MITS bus, go downtown, transfer, and go out on a route to either the south side or to the east side. And they have to get off somewhere, and they have to wander around for half an hour. And then if they wind up right back at the spot they got off, the incoming bus will be there. They pick them up, they come back to campus. And they write what is the visual rhetoric that they see emerging from what they see. And it's a downer for all the students. It's decay and blight and housing that's falling apart, and the streetscapes are not inviting, and lawns are not as well kept. Now, I'm sending them places that they wouldn't go. They'll get all along Tillotson in their time at Ball State, and they'll get up and down McGallion from Walmart to
the mall.
Yeah, to the mall. So they'll see that, and that's in some ways to them, I suppose, more uplifting. In some ways to some of us, is more junk escape of retail, but I send them out to places they wouldn't go otherwise, and it's usually very depressing for them.
Yeah, what are you trying to get at with that project?
Sharpen their observation skills, take them out of their comfort zone. A lot of them never rode an urban bus before, and a lot of them have never wandered around a strange neighborhood. And some of them I send to specific locales. I don't tell them what it is in advance, but I tell them where to look. And it's the old Indiana Steel and Wire factory, which is now 80% gone. The old Chevy transmission plant, which is 65 acres of scar on Muncie's south side. And a couple other places I sent them like that, with an eye toward getting reports from them in class and then discussing what's going on. That these used to be vibrant centers of economic development and productivity of American product. And they're gone, in some part because of shipment of jobs overseas or to other countries, although in a bigger part because of technological changes, where Indiana makes more steel today than ever, but they need only 1/10 as many workers. And it lets them know a lot of what the Midwest was like. That's not just the story of Muncie, that's the story of the Rust Belt everywhere. And they're all a part of it.
So would you say that the symbolic divisions of North, South, and Muncie are real?
Absolutely, they're real. The Linns, if you're familiar with the Middletown series.
Very much so.
1929, they wrote a line, which I always point out to students. They said, at that time, the most important factor of your future working life was on which side of the watershed you were born. Now, that's the North-South divide. Sure, people think Muncie's two communities. And generally the North Side, by that we mean the Northwest side.
Mm-hmm.
And the South Side is everything else, and including Whiteley and where we are right now.
That's interesting that you say that you're making the distinction not just North and South, but a particular part of the North Side. Because I don't know if too many people take that into consideration.
Well, I guess the downtown might be neutral in this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's the northwest quadrant. Take Walnut and the river, and everything northwest of that is one community. Actually, at one time it was a community, although it was never incorporated. It was Normal City, named because of Indiana State Normal College. We were the eastern chapter of Indiana State Normal College, meaning Ball State. So Normal City had its own downtown, the village, and amenities, and its own platted, developed neighborhood, the Westwood, just west of Ball State. All that was developed and it was developed by many of the Balls, because when they donated the university, they bought up lots of land around the university thinking it would be a place attractive to live, and it was. That's the nicest, the most expensive homed neighborhoods inside Muncie.
Yes.
And then everything west of there, up to and past McGalliard and to the river, are the types of neighborhoods that a lot of my students grew up in their hometowns.
Mm-hmm.
It's
glorious
a solid
suburbia.
middle-class neighborhood.
Yeah. I'm going to throw out a quote, or maybe not a quote, but a sentiment from the Linns, just regarding their observations of what was going on at the high school at the time in the mid-20s, and that was that they actually themselves quoted a couple people from the south side of town saying that their kids would stop going to the high school, which was centrally located but more north than they were used to on the south side of town, but they would stop going to the high school because they were made fun of, or there was some tiffs between north and south siders, and they just didn't feel welcome. And it's ironic because there were some speakers at the town hall meetings that was the same concern 80 some years later, that they wouldn't be welcomed by the north siders or by everyone else, the other. Could you comment on that?
Well, that's been shown to just be inaccurate projections. The kids appear to have got along seamlessly since the merger of the two. I don't recall that myself, my read of Middletown, and I've never sat down and read it from page one through to the end. They did, in their participant observation technique, they often would do surveys which were not randomized,
Yes.
stratified,
Yeah.
and it's really easy to get some anecdotal commentary that might not be all that representative of much more than just a small group. So I don't know that before, let's say in the 40s and 50s, the Linds were here in the 20s first, and then in the 30s they had their follow-up.
Mhm.
Let's say in the 40s and 50s, I don't know that the North and South didn't get along, although the Northwest side was always more professional workers, as the Linds would call it, the business class. The South side was always the working class. And the South side of Muncie has always been blue-collar neighborhoods.
So it's more a feeling that the Southsiders have less than a reality that they're targets or victims or whatever you might call it.
I don't know. I guess I'd have to think about that a little bit, Rich. Certainly, it had to hurt. I'm not even sure on this. I'm just thinking out loud.
Sure.
The African American community was really hurt by the development of Northside High School. And it was about as transparent a racism as you can imagine. They were really hurt. I don't know that the Southsiders cared because they by then had Southside High School.
Mm-hmm.
So it was really just splitting Central into the whites, and the blacks would keep going to Central. So I don't know that that was that was divisive in the 60s from that standpoint, or the 70s. So, but there would still be, actually, just a consistent, I think, feeling of a North Muncie and a South Muncie.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. We'll switch gears here a little bit. What role do you think a high school plays in a community's identity?
Well, it plays a tremendous role in any community's identity, and an even bigger role in a community in which large numbers don't get education beyond high school.
Mm-hmm.
When you go down to the South Side homecoming parades, you see guys who are in their 50s wearing their letter jackets from high school. It's because they don't have letter jackets from college. In fact, they didn't go to college. So the high school remains more part of their life and identity, I think, than others. I mean, whatever high school you went to has been superseded now by, you're a grad student, aren't you?
Yes, yes.
So where'd you go to undergrad?
IUPUI.
Well, that's probably got a little bit more of your loyalty now than your high school does. And Ball State will probably have a little more with a master's degree.
Yeah.
And so when you do that, you lose some of that need for the high school affiliation and transfer it to the higher education. But if you don't, and if that was your limit of education, and you stayed in your hometown, and you worked there, then there was more identification with that school.
That's very well put. That's a similar sentiment to Andy Warner when we interviewed him. He said something along the lines of, people on the South Side, there's two big events in their life: high school graduation and marriage.
Mm.
And I think you were kind of going in that same general direction.
Wow. Let's not go on the record that I agreed with a school board member.
Okay. Okay. What effects do you think consolidation will have in the short term and long term?
Well, in theory, it should ease the budgetary crisis, although I'm not so sure that's just a theory.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I don't know. It was all driven by money.
Mm-hmm.
It should make maybe for some more opportunities for students, not the district not having to divide some resources in half and make sure that there's a certain art program out at Southside and one at Central.
Yeah.
We're just going to have one school, so there'll be a program and more kids will be eligible for it. Other than that, I don't know. Muncie continues to lose a couple hundred kids every year. We're down to 7,800 students. So in 10 years, are we going to be looking at 6,000 students? And those are just going to be really tough numbers to deal with financially.
Do you see any way that Muncie as a city can do something to change that trend?
Well, whenever I do have an idea, I try and write about it.
Yeah.
I think the current city administration is doing everything it can to try to enhance Muncie's economic climate. But to be honest, the schools are one of the biggest drawbacks this community faces. Ball State hires about, I think it's maybe 200 new professionals every year, either teachers or technical professionals in staffing positions. And if they move from out of state to Delaware County, if they have a spouse who also needs a job and has a lot better opportunity in Indianapolis, Marion County, then they're looking at splitting the difference and living somewhere down 69 or going to Fishers.
Yeah, yeah.
If they don't have that need as bad, then they'll move to Delaware County, but they're not going to move to Muncie. They'll move to Mount Pleasant Township for Yorktown schools, or West Dell schools, or Wapahani, or Cowan, or Daleville, or Delta schools.
But like you said
or the
earlier,
schools.
Central's reputation is worse than the school itself really is education-wise.
And well, when you move into a community, you're not going to take the chance of saying, oh, that's probably not deserved reputation.
Huh, okay. So it's less a reality that other schools are so much better, but more people come in and they're scared off because of what they hear?
I think so. And the younger kids that you have, if you did move into Muncie, you'd make sure you moved into the northwest quadrant. So the kids would go to Mitchell or Storr Elementary or West Side Elementary.
Okay.
Now, this is a little bit off topic. So
No,
maybe
go
I shouldn't
ahead.
say it, but
Go ahead.
when you talk about schools, including high schools and community identity, when we had the mass consolidation of the late 1950s, we had 12 township schools in Delaware County school systems, and a 13th was Muncie. And so they tried to consolidate down, and the people were kicking and screaming every inch of the way. They didn't want to do it. And many townships just didn't. Salem Township didn't consolidate with anybody. Monroe Township didn't. Mount Pleasant Township. Liberty Perry, 2 townships consolidated. The biggest was a 4-township consolidation in the northeast sector of the county. And then there were 2 townships in the northwest sector. And they all built new high schools. And all but one, in order to not favor one area over another, made the decision to put the junior, senior high school out in the middle of nowhere. So you couldn't walk to it. Kids couldn't walk to lunch, during lunch, anywhere. Demanded transportation, cars. And if you've been around in the community, you know Wapahani on the river out in the middle of cornfields.
Monroe Central.
Delta, Monroe Central. At least there's a little bit of, that's Monroe Central, yeah. But Cowan, there's somewhat of a community, but not really. They should have picked Selma and built the thing in Selma. And then Selma might just get an economic boost from that. There might be some people who would have been willing to put in some homes, some new development, build a dozen homes here. And people would be attracted, they'd live there, their kids would walk to school, they would walk to the athletic events rather than have to be driven to everything.
Yeah.
And that, to me, just is just destructive. Schools are important to neighborhoods. Something I really fault Muncie Community Schools for, the closure of so many elementary schools. Those are vital to neighborhoods. And Whiteley neighborhood would just be devastated if Longfellow were taken away. But that's exactly what happened to Riley School on the west side of Walnut Street. It happened to Morrison Mock, which was also the special needs school. Destroys neighborhoods when you just uproot the elementary school.
Now, what do you think about the business community's role in all of this and the consolidation process? Or lack thereof, you could say.
I don't know. I guess I'd have to think about that. The business community has had its hands full just trying to stay solvent as Muncie has lost in the last 20 years industry. You know, when you had a place like Board Warner,
Mm-hmm.
and when it was at its heyday with 5,000 employees, there were another 30 businesses of anywhere from 10 to 30 employees that place depended on to help them keep going. Machine shops, cleaning services, security, all sorts of other businesses. And now with Board Warner gone, so are those other 20 businesses. And the few that might be trying to hang on, let's say a Cintas, you know where Cintas is downtown?
No.
They're the rug and
Uniform.
cloth,
Yeah.
uniform people.
Yeah, it just came to mind.
They had to close up their main building downtown. It's for sale right now. And they retrenched in a neighboring building that they used secondarily. It's now their primary building.
Wow.
Because I'll bet they lost half of their clients. Now, as that management's trying to deal with that, I don't think they have a whole lot of time to think about, well, by the way, what about the schools? What can we do to help them?
Do you think they were kind of negligent in error, though, considering how important a good school system is, like you were saying, to bringing people into the community, and bringing people in would mean bringing a workforce in?
Well, I don't know if they were negligent. I suspect they typically voted, although I suppose this is another issue, Rich, that prior to this year, school boards persisted in having their elections, and they had the choice to do this, having their elections during primary elections, when only the party partisan, and that's only 10% of the voters vote.
Yeah.
So, and school boards had the option to change that for a long time, and they didn't. And I think there was a good reason for it, but that meant that when you ran for school board, and you ran nonpartisan, but the only people who voted in the primary were partisans, so you got the least turnout possible to get elected. And I think we elected some pretty lousy people who maybe had good name recognition among a small population of the voters. Now, could businesses have done something about that? I don't know. I only had one good business idea ever, and even it didn't make money, so
Should we go into that?
Nah.
Okay, well, switching topics again, but what advice would you give to children growing up in Muncie today, who are living in the city as it is now, and the school system as it is now?
Well, the surest route to poverty is don't finish your education, dabble in crime, and have children you can't afford. So my advice would be, don't do that. Get the education, finish it. 20th Century Scholars Program will guarantee college if you're willing to buckle down and stay drug-free. I guess everybody's going to be tempted for a little bit of a high thrill in some way, alcohol if nothing else. But you better minimize that and don't have children.
Do you think the consolidation and going to one school and consolidating resources and not just school buildings themselves, do you think that will better prepare people to get the type of education they need to succeed?
Well, I think there's more potential there. Is Dick Daniels still coordinating project leadership to try to promote 20th century scholars? I don't know if he is or not, but
That's a good question. I don't know.
He was independently employed, but he worked at the Career Center. His office was there, and his job was to maximize that. And I guess the answer to your question should be yes, there should be more potential for doing more with the resources we have under consolidation.
Okay. Well, that kind of wraps up all the formal questions I have, but I want to give you the chance to go anywhere you want or cover something you thought we didn't cover but should have. Just give your perspective on the floor is yours, basically.
Well, I had a few digressions that we went into now and then that I was able to hit on, I guess. School boards, even when, and I'm mystified by this, I've known people who were very good people, who had great ideas, and they ran for school board, and they got elected, and everything they wanted to do within a few months was out the window. And they were, instead of being the policy setters and making sure that policy was implemented by the administration, it was an upside-down model. They were suddenly really working for the administration. And the administration is telling them what to do, and they're doing it. We've had some good administrators, but we've had some terrible administrators. The predecessor to the current superintendent of Muncie schools was a disaster. Never even moved to Muncie.
I've heard that
You've
story,
heard
yeah.
those stories.
Yeah.
That's the debacle. And at the worst possible time.
Be like the President of the United States residing in Canada and ruling from there.
Yeah, I suppose that's one way to put it. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is other than I am not an opponent of more vouchers. When parents can't get from the public school system the type of education they want their kids to have, I don't mind them being able to shop around and send the kids somewhere else. The kids who are left behind, I would hope, are going to get more attention. I guess the parents who are most concerned with their kids are going to try to make sure that their kids work hard. The parents who are not concerned, and that's certainly the worst problem in the whole school system, when parents don't care.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Their kids themselves, or they're strung out on who knows what addictions, that kid's in really bad shape. I'd rather he get more attention from what the school can do for him, even if it's without some of the other peers who are doing better because they're going to another school. And I don't know, that's a long, complicated argument, I realize.
Yeah, but it makes sense. In many ways, education is a generational thing.
Oh, yes.
Very much so.
I do wish Muncie would emulate Burris with at least one school and create a K-12 magnet school. And I think they would and if they would put it, say, up at Northside, where they could partner closely with Ball State. And when my kids were going to Burris, they interacted with college students one-on-one who were in teachers' college constantly. And that has to give a child some more opportunity to practice what they're learning.
And it's
be guided.
good mentorship, yeah.
So if Muncie schools would do that, I'll bet they could fill up 13 classrooms with 30 kids.
So you're suggesting the consolidation of middle school so that Northside could be used as a magnet school?
Well, that might not be a bad idea. It's probably too big to be a magnet school.
Yeah.
You could use half of it, or use one of the other half dozen closed buildings we have sitting empty.
They're sprinkled all around town.
You know, Wilson's indebtedness just got paid off last year.
You talking about the old Wilson or the new
No,
Wilson?
the new Wilson.
Yeah.
The money we borrowed to build that got paid off the year we closed it. That's just lamentable.
I agree. Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thanks for the opportunity, Rich. I hope the project goes well.
Thank you.